Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode number 26 with Hungry for More. I'm Robin. This is my friend Jennifer. And today we're going to talk about social eating, which is a good time for us to talk about this as we're coming upon all the holidays and all the parties going on. So we thought this would be a great time to talk about this because I think as you see, as we get going, it touches all of us and it influences the choices we make with how we take care of ourselves, how we listen to ourselves, and how we meet our needs. So especially when it comes with food, obviously, right? So I'm going to start us off with a story, something that I experienced. And it's like I've experienced many versions of the same story throughout my life. And this one was already, I had been in the practice of conscious eating, and I still had some of these things. The social piece of eating was still something I had to just keep practicing a lot. And I wouldn't even say I've perfected it, but that's okay. So one time we were flying home from somewhere and we had a long flight. I think we were coming from the East Coast. And I knew I was hungry and I was like, well, let's eat dinner at the airport before we get on the flight. Because now they like serve the miniest little
Nothing really
ever. So I was like, hey, I had dinner. Well, to my surprise, we got bumped up to first class. Actually, Tyler got a ticket that got bumped up to first class because he's a frequent flyer. Anyway, he's like, hey, you take it this time. So I was like, oh, that's awesome. So I go, and of course, big meal is being served.
on glass dishes.
Dang it.
It's
That was
super
my first time ever on.
fancy.
Yeah. That was my first time ever on a first class flight. So I wasn't sure about, well, anyway, I'd already eaten and made the choice. So anyway, here she is taking orders and I was completely satisfied. I'd literally just eaten and I still ordered and got a plate and ate some of it, not because I was tempted. Truly, I was like so fully satisfied from my dinner, not because I was like, oh, that sounds so good, I don't want to miss out. It was all influenced by my fear of like a fear of what this is so funny, fear of hurting her feelings. She's doing her job. She could probably care less if I eat or not, but it was influenced by something. I didn't want to be seen a certain way. I didn't want to offend. I didn't want to, whatever it was, I didn't want to cause problems. Right. I didn't want to offend
Right.
somebody. I didn't want to seem ungrateful. All those beliefs that we have about how we should be and how we should interact with one another. Right. And so there I went cramming in some bites. And I was like, I won't eat everything. I'll just eat enough to, look like I appreciated this food. And so I did. And I felt terrible physically. I was so overfull. But I really, because I knew I had been far enough in the journey, I was like, I could see what had just happened. And I spent some of the flight just thinking about that, not beating myself up. I've really learned how to do this journey with just being really curious and being like, well, that's so interesting. Like, I wonder why it ever makes sense to overfill my stomach, right? Like to go beyond
Right.
how my stomach feels and the feedback of my body. And so I was just really curious about it. And then I got a little emotional because I was thinking, man, I see this reflected in so many other areas of my life where I genuinely, it's a no inside for me, genuinely, right? And I say, yes, I commit, I do the thing, whatever, because again, I don't want to be rude. I don't want to hurt feelings. And really, we need to be truthful about this. Although it may be the belief in our mind is that I don't want to hurt feelings, really what it is I want to protect an image of myself,
Right.
right? That's what it comes down to more than anything.
Right. And what people are thinking and
What people are thinking about
whatnot.
me. Yep. And will their image of me change by this choice that I'm making? And so I sat there, with a, unbuttoning my top button and super uncomfortable. But
Everybody's been there who's
oh,
watching.
totally,
Sure
totally. And like I said, it wasn't the first time that I had made that choice, but yeah, I really made the connection during that reflection time of like, wow, I see that if I can't even handle being true to my needs when it comes to food socially, then when it's a more complex issue, when it's a little bit more, more complex, more people involved, like how am I going to be true to myself in those situations?
Right. Right. I mean, I can't even think of specific, but I know I felt many times where I've been in that same situation. But this is interesting because what you're specifically talking about is you were full already, you were satisfied, you didn't want to hurt somebody's feelings or be the awkward person who wasn't eating the food and all of that. But what about the people who are hungry? So this is kind of another thing. They are hungry, they're in a social situation, and there's food out that they don't normally partake of, nor do they want to, but people make comments like,
oh yeah,
oh, you're not eating that, you're being good, I'm bad, or
yes,
oh, you're so good. I mean, that's a social pressure too, honestly.
oh
I've been in it many times. I can go out to eat with my girlfriends, we eat very different. I do not care what they are eating, but they seem to care what I'm eating if I'm not partaking of the dessert that night or something like that, right?
Yeah.
So like,
oh yeah,
it's comments are made, especially by family. I mean, so that's kind of another side of the social pressures. I am actually hungry, but no, I'm not choosing to eat that today. Maybe one day I am and one day I'm not. I get comments about that too. Well, why aren't you having it today? You had it 3 days ago.
right.
Like, it's very interesting, people
Yeah.
and how they do that, but it's such a social weird thing.
It is. I think it's interesting that we even comment on each other's
Right?
choices in the first place. That's interesting in and of itself. And it's all our own projections, right? We're projecting our own insecurity, and that's what's happening, truthful. But it can be so tricky. I know for me, one of the things that I still deal with is like the discomfort of me feeling like, "Well, I don't want people to feel like if I'm not choosing the dessert that night, say, or whatever, people think I'm prudish, or they think I'm judging them for having the dessert, right? Or they think that I don't have any, that I'm just like, I don't allow myself to have fun, and that I'm super strict. Or even as a coach, like, I don't want people to think that, that I eat a certain way and that I'm regimented. It's like, no, I enjoy pleasure in my life.
Right.
And there's times I do choose it. Many times I do choose the dessert and have the dessert, right?
Right. Well, and I'm going to give an example really quick that just happened this last weekend. So we, if you haven't been to Allegiant Stadium in Vegas, I highly recommend it. It's the most amazing stadium. But my neighbor and I took my daughter and one of her girlfriends to a concert, the Pink concert, for her birthday.
Fun.
It was her 18th birthday. It was so much fun. We surprised her and we took her, and we had fun, and we were, she's very much a conscious eater too. But while we were down there, I was very conscious. We went to eat probably 6 hours before the concert, and I just got something very basic because I knew that at the concert I might splurge and get something. Well, in the past, and it's because I have had people call me out because I coach on nutrition and I coach all these things. Sometimes I feel like people are watching me like a hawk, and honestly, they are. Yeah. Like, it's not that I'm imagining things, they are. But with conscious eating now, where I've shifted from this really like that boom, 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 where I pre-prep my food and take it with me. Now I'm conscious eating. Right. One of my favorite foods in the world is really good nachos. And at Allegiant Stadium, they have a nacho bar that's like not gross, disgusting stadium nachos. Like, they're gourmet. Really good. Yum. And I looked at Mindy, I'm like, I am definitely getting those. Like, I was feeling hungry. We had walked, and I'm like, I'm definitely getting them. And I knew it came in this huge football bowl. And I'm like, okay, I know I won't eat them all. Does anybody want any? She goes, I might have one or two, but no. And I'm like, okay, Kate, pause right there. In the past, pre-conscious, I would have been like, oh, I'm going to feel so bad if I'm eating these and she's not, because this isn't something I normally eat. Yes. I'm going to feel so shameful and so blah, blah, blah. Nope. I bought them. I went and sat down. My daughter and her friend had a few. I ate them. I stopped when I was satisfied. We finished the whole bowl. Don't get me wrong. We finished it all, but that was between 3 of us. And it was okay. But I'm telling you, in the past, I would have been like, I have been on a cruise before with people that I have coached, and they've come out and went, hey, you're not supposed to eat that, like joking, but it's like, oh my gosh. So there's this whole social side of it. I'm good. I can make my own decisions. And I really did want that at the time. And I felt good about it. I was fine. Yeah. Yeah. So we've been taught since early on
living in this world, there's just certain rules of how we interact with each other, and that there's certain things you do that can hurt people's feelings, and certain choices. You should always say yes when you're offered something, or it's rude not to eat when other people are eating. So we've created a lot of rules around this. And so healing this, the first step in healing this is we just have to become aware of that and pay attention to how many times we're just automatically eating and making the choice based on these rules that are so entrenched in us.
Right.
And to kind of wake up to them and be like, okay, do I agree with this? First of all, do I want to do this anymore? And if I don't, am I willing to sit in some of the discomfort that comes with it? Right. Knowing, with comments that might be made, or sometimes we don't know what they're thinking.
Stop right there. Because you have the discomfort that you had from overeating.
Yes.
Or the discomfort for comments. Which one's going to serve your body better?
Right.
You use discomfort with both scenarios.
Exactly. Yes. Yes. We teach that all the time. Discomfort's going to be present. Truly. You're not just like shoving it out of the, I didn't shove it out of the way.
It's going to be there one way or another.
Right. On that flight, I didn't shove it out of the way and be like, oh, good, I don't have to be uncomfortable since I decided to eat. Now everybody's going to be happy with me. No, I was uncomfortable big time on the other end,
Right.
So yes. So this is just something, even as you're listening to us, start witnessing yourself and being like, oh man, yeah, there are certain things that I always feel like I have to say yes to, or I have to eat in these situations. I remember one time, I had forgotten there was a farewell lunch for a friend that was moving, totally forgot. So I had eaten a couple hours before that. And then I saw the text and was like, oh man. So when I went to the restaurant, not hungry at all, no desire, which I was bummed because I love the restaurant. And I was like, dang, I would have rather eaten this, but body was like, sorry, girl, don't need anything. Please don't, So I sat there and I talked to them and I enjoyed myself.
Yeah.
So here's the point to make with that is for us to understand with the two scenarios. So we've given you guys two so far of the social things where we're feeling like we're going to hurt somebody else's feelings by the choices we make, right?
Right.
Or we're worried about the judgment on us as far as like how we're going to be perceived either way, whether we eat the thing or not.
Right.
And this is where the conscious eating practice comes in clutch. You'll be able to catch these because remember, they're so ingrained in us. Okay. So the conscious eating practice is going to help you catch these because when you're doing the practice, you are pausing before you eat to just check in and just make sure. And so when you recognize, so if I'm on that flight, not hungry, the body's like, that wasn't me telling you to eat. Sorry. Then, it's your mind. And it's like, okay, well then why am I getting the cue to eat right now when it's not hungry? And then you can see it for what it is. Yeah. I just am kind of embarrassed if I say no, or I don't want to hurt her feelings.
Right. They went to work, they put it out.
Yeah. So that's how these programmed things are going to come to your awareness. And then when they come to your awareness, there's a choice to be made, right? That's when we can undo some of these things. And I think it's important here to make sure to understand that whether I choose to eat something or not, back to the airplane, me eating did not create a feeling of joy inside of anybody or a feeling of like satisfaction. We're not that powerful with each other to like, okay, if I eat, it's literally going to create a feeling inside of you. Now they may be like, oh, she likes what I made, and they may feel happy about that, but that's because of how they're thinking, right? Or they may be thinking, gosh, that's so ungrateful. She didn't even order food. That's her creating that feeling for her, not me eating or not. So remember that. Yeah.
Right. And I was just thinking of, sometimes it's really good because I'm such a visual learner. I always tell people, I promise you, I have a nonverbal learning disorder. Like I actually have to picture these scenarios and understand them. And one of the things that I've gotten really accustomed to telling people is, say somebody brings you a loaf of bread or some cookies or there's dessert or whatever. Thank you so much. Well, are you going to try it or not? You know what? I'm so full right now and I want to try it when I'm not full so I can really appreciate it. You know how things don't taste as good when you're over.
Oh, for sure.
So that's one line I use all the time. Oh my gosh, that looks so good. I'm going to save this for later when I'm hungry.
Right. Yep. Or yeah, exactly. That's a good way to answer to that.
And you eat it or you don't eat it. They don't know. It
Right.
doesn't matter.
Yep. True. And then, the other thing we talked about, well, you and I before this talked about a social thing that comes up is maybe not, that might not be the scenario. You might show up to something and you are hungry, you want to enjoy the food, but you're like, oh, I just tend to just completely turn my brain off and go for it. When I'm in social situations, I'm going to have fun, and I don't want to have to worry about things. And so I tend to just turn my brain off, but then I way overdo it and regret it later.
Right.
So that's another energy type of thing that can come around with social things. And here's what I've discovered in coaching people. I'll ask them, like, why do you think your brain turns off when you go in that situation? Right? Because it's not like, oh, I can either socialize or eat. Like, I can't do both and be conscious. Right. So I'm like, what's the payoff? What's the payoff to turning the brain off? And really, when we dig into it, we realize, well, I don't want to have to tell myself no if there's something that I want. I want to be able to eat what I want to eat there. And I don't want to feel guilty, right? Sometimes people are going into something social that they're eating something that they normally don't. And so they don't want to feel the guilt of it. And it's like, can you let all that go? Still enjoy the food. You don't have to feel guilty. That's conscious eating, is making the conscious choice. I do want to enjoy these things.
Right.
I do want to have them.
It's appropriate at times to enjoy those things.
Yeah, I want to experience the pleasure of this. Correct. Right. And so many times, be aware when you notice your brain turning off, it's a protective mechanism. It's you feeling like, well, since I'm not going to stick perfectly to my plan, I'm just going to turn my brain off so I don't have to deal with that inner voice criticizing me the whole night. But what if that inner voice wasn't critical? What if it was just like, yeah, let's enjoy this. And then you still can go in with conscious eating. You still go in knowing my body is the authority and I am going to listen to her needs and meet them. So I am going to enjoy what I want to enjoy. I am going to visit. I am going to have the food, all of that. And when my body says she's done, I'll listen and I'll stop. Right. And that's how we can be in that environment where we're not scared to go off our diet, or we're not like, even if we choose, I know a lot of people that are like, yes, ahead of time, I'm making the decision, I'm going to eat whatever I want. I'm not going to feel guilty about it, but they turn off their brains. And it's like, but why did you?
Way overboard. And the other thing is when you get there, it's like, why the brain is turned off, do everything you can do before you turn it back on.
Right.
I mean, this whole entire topic could lead into every podcast we have, because it's all kind of along those things. But the one last thing I want you to talk about, and we've talked about this before, is in the social eating, like when people are gifting or when they've made food and you're like, you know what? No, I'm not hungry. And we are concerned about hurting their feelings. I cannot for the life of me remember, you have a line you say like, I'm not responsible for how you feel or something. You said one time and I wrote it down and I'm like, oh, I like that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. The choice I make with food is not responsible for how you feel about it.
Yeah.
Is it something
I'm
about
not responsible for how you feel about the choices I make with food?
Yeah.
I'm writing that down.
There it is. There it is. I'm not responsible about how you feel about my decisions I make with food. Right. And when we just zoom out and sit back, it's actually pretty ridiculous, isn't it? That like we put that pressure on each other, that we do judge. I've been there too, where we do judge how somebody's eating, where we do feel bad about ourselves based on a choice somebody else is making. I remember I still actually have to catch myself, like at the grocery store. And if, you see someone, you're like, oh, what's in their basket? How do they eat? What's in their basket? Like where it's just so programmed in us to do that. But if we zoom out, it's ridiculous.
That is so funny that you say that, because I have to tell you this. This is hysterical. I'm in line at Costco 2 weeks ago, week and a half ago. No, it was 2 weeks ago. And I have a wedding dinner and catering. Mm-hmm. It is full of things I never buy.
Yeah.
And somebody got in line behind me and she's like, oh, is that good? And I was like, oh, I don't know, but I almost felt like I needed to say, oh yeah, these groceries aren't mine. I'm buying them for a wedding I'm catering.
Yeah, to explain
I felt
yourself.
that way.
Yeah.
Like, I don't need to explain myself to anybody, but that did cross my mind.
Yeah, exactly. And we don't have to be ashamed of ourselves or judge ourselves for these things coming up. We're programmed to do that. Like I said, from early on, it's so intermingled with social standing and our image and our identity and everything. That's going to happen. But now let's just become aware of it and see it for what it is. And I'll notice that I'll be like, oh, I just noticed I'm really interested in what you're doing over here. That's none of my business. Right.
Right.
And so, yes. And then sitting with the discomfort, making that choice. I know I tell a story in one of our courses about how I just met this new girl that we went out to lunch with. We totally like clicked the first time we met, and we had we made a plan to meet up for like a meditation thing. Right after the meditation thing, she's like, oh man, I'm really hungry. Can we go somewhere? And I was like, ooh, right away, all those things that come up normally. And because I'd eaten right before and wasn't hungry at all. And so I was like, yeah. And of course my brain's like, oh my gosh, she doesn't know me. I don't want her not to eat because I'm not eating, and I don't want her to feel awkward because I don't have a problem sitting at a restaurant eating and somebody else isn't. But I know a lot of people feel dumb if they're the only ones eating. So anyway, all this in like 2 seconds, all these thoughts are coming through my brain. And I was just like, yeah, what? I'm not hungry, but I'm more than happy to walk with you somewhere and let's grab something. And she was totally fine with it. Right. So it's just those things that are going to come up in the discomfort, but at what cost? Like, we have to see what we're doing too. And that's where I want to kind of slow this down and apply it beyond just food. What we're doing in these scenarios where the body is saying, no, thank you, I don't want any. So it's whether it's me on the plane or whether you're at this social thing and you're worried about people's, what they're thinking and feeling about you. What we tend to do is just kind of to the body, like scoot over, like shut up.
Step aside.
Step aside, be quiet. I'm going to do this because fill in the blank. Right. And that's how I see that relationship to my body when I'm doing that I'm just like, no, your needs don't matter. Scoot over. We're going to do this. You're just going to have to take one to the team. But that's the thing. Who's the one who takes the brunt of it? My body does. She gets burdened with all this to take care of, And so when I started seeing it that way, as I'm in relationship to my body, and it's a relationship I value just as much as I value with you and everybody else, then my body becomes one of the people in the room that I'm being considerate of. Right. I want to be considerate, but with my flight attendant, I want to be considerate of the passenger sitting next to me. And I want to be considerate with my body, all these things. And so keeping that in mind and making decisions based on that, and then owning that. And you will be uncomfortable sometimes. Either people will verbally say the thing you're thinking they're going to say, or you just are not sure, but your mind is telling you they're judging you. Either way, you're going to have some discomfort, but at what cost, right? At the end of the day, you're true to what you need and true to what's right. And you're not taking responsibility for how people feel about your personal choice of how to eat, right? And then taking this beyond, like, if we can take this to the very basic act of self-care of eating, and we can practice being in that discomfort of making choices that are true to us and letting other people feel how they feel. If we can consistently do that with something as simple as food, then we're going to that same muscle. It's the same muscle of discomfort that comes with more complex issues in your life.
Well, and that's what I was just going to say, because when you were talking in the beginning and you were opening, I can remember in a time in my life when I would be doing, the room mom, making my homemade bread, doing this, doing that, like everything. I had to do everything. And people would ask me to do something. And I'd be like, okay. And my friends would be like, Jen, it's okay to say no. You need to say no. And it was the same thing with food. At that time in my life, I was very unconscious that yes, right? It was the exact same behavior. And it's so interesting. And just a few months ago, my friend was like, you literally said no. And I said, yeah, I just don't have time to take on more in my life. I have evolved. Like, that's part of it, right?
Yes.
You have this evolution and you notice it rolling over into other parts of your life, whether it started with that and rolled over into food or vice versa. It's indifferent. it's the same. It's,
Yes.
I'm taking care of me. I'm done doing everything for everybody, because the reality is taking care of you gives everybody you at 100% instead of fragmented pieces.
Yeah, exactly. So learn from us. We know you're in it too. You've been raised in the same water we swim in here, and put it to practice, remembering that, when you're up against one of these situations and you're tempted to just do it because you don't want the judgment, think about like, man, but if I can learn to do this with food, I'm going to be so much stronger to take care of myself and stand up for myself and own the needs I have and the choices I make in other situations. So let me do this with food. Let me practice. And I promise you, you will evolve. I've seen that in my own life. When you were sharing that example, one came up that I'm in right now of a decision I'm making to step away from something that I've been involved in. And people are really sad and upset that I'm leaving, but I know that it's the right choice for me. Right. And so, yes, this is another episode that is such a great example of how the most basic self-care act of eating is a reflection, like how we take care of ourselves in that way is a reflection in the rest of our lives. So it's worth doing the work. It's simple work, but we've got to be aware and just keep choosing to respond to our true needs. It's a beautiful thing.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. Like we tell you every week, put it to the test.
Yes.
See if you notice yourself. See, it may be something that you didn't even realize you were doing, and now you're going to be aware of it. So good luck. Let us know how it goes.
Awesome. See you guys later.